Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to have everyone for the second episode of the George Can Learn podcast. I'm really excited because I have someone who is a guru in working with SMBs and is someone who is really entering into, becoming an expert in remote talent and hiring remote employees. So I'm super excited to have our guest. I'm really just going to jump right in and get to introducing him. He's an entrepreneurial sensation from Costa Rica, one of the coolest business professors at MIT, and the master at finding incredible remote talent. Max Faingezicht, co-founder and co-CEO of Telescopeds. Thank you for being on.
Thanks, George. It's great to be here. I'm excited to spend some time with you and the audience.
Yeah, awesome. So I'd love to give you, pass the baton on to you and give you an opportunity to give a brief introduction for yourself. I met you through Techstars Boston and, you being around as a mentor and, having a really great impression on me as a young associate working at Techstars. Really love for you to share your story to, the audience watching.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you mentioned I'm from Costa Rica. So the last name doesn't give it away. We were talking about that just before we started recording. I'm a son of immigrants, I guess. Grandparents came from Poland and Germany and established themselves in Costa Rica. I'm also, third generation entrepreneur. So that's definitely something that runs in the family. And, I studied engineering. I was always very curious about how things work and, how systems are put together and how do they fit and what makes things, do the things that they do. I ended up starting a small business in Costa Rica and, that kind of started to take off, but I was eager to, kind of get back into technology, which was really, the thing that I've been always very passionate about. And I applied to grad school at MIT, which is what brought me to the US. So I'm a kind of family of immigrants, and now I'm a new immigrant in a new country myself. But anyways, the MIT experience was incredible. I did a short stint at Amazon after a failed startup that didn't take off. And right after graduating, I started a company called ThriveHive. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, but it was focused on helping small business owners figure out their marketing through a recommendation system that helped them with their marketing needs. After that, our company got acquired in 2016 by a very large public media company. And, I stayed with them as CTO for their digital marketing division for almost 3 years, became even more involved than I already was with Techstars. That's, I think, probably around the time that we met. I also have been mentoring at MIT, teaching a class and helping out in other areas, as well as teaching an entrepreneurship course at the University of Costa Rica. And right before the pandemic, we started our last company, our newest company called Telescoped, and we're focused on helping connect the best and most amazing remote software engineers in LATAM with companies in the US so that we can completely change the trajectories and career paths. And happy to talk about that as well. Thanks for having me, George. Let's get into it.
Yeah, awesome. So I'd really love to take us into kind of a postmortem on ThriveHive, right, which was one of the big successes in your career. And really some of the things that I'd like to kind of get in on is, maybe coming back, looking at some of the things that you did, what were the, success points that really led to, your eventual acquisition at ThriveHive, and then maybe some of the things that you felt like you could have done better and might, take as a learning opportunity towards future, ventures that you'll do.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think with ThriveHive, first of all, and this is something that I've carried on, for everything that I've done. It was a very mission-driven company, and I think that matters. We were trying to help small business owners realize their dreams. If you are an interior designer who's got a passion for design, marketing shouldn't get in the way. And the same goes, the same is true for many other industries. And I had been there, right? I had been a small business owner. I had felt that pain. So I feel like understanding the why behind what you're doing helped us attract the right people. So everyone in our team was extremely passionate about what we were doing, and that created a lot of alignment. Also, when the going gets tough, if you kind of know why you're doing what you're doing and you care about the people that you're helping and the problem that you're solving, it's much easier to weather the storm. And so I feel like that's one of the biggest learnings, mission, core values, attracting the right people, focusing on people in general, not just the customers and your investors, but also your team, making sure that, you're helping them grow and flex their muscles in terms of where they want to be challenged, how they want to grow. So that was one thing that I think worked very well for us. The second, I think we were naive, we were young, we were very ambitious, and we were trying to really build something that had the potential to change the world. It was incredibly difficult, incredibly large, and I think there was a strength and a weakness. It was a strength because it obviously attracted venture investors, it attracted the right capital, it attracted the right partners, but it was also a challenge because it was so big that you needed to focus, like, how do I enter this market? Like, what's the way in? What's my beachhead? How do I kind of start making some progress? And I think that that's definitely something that we can talk about on the challenges side of things. Other things that I learned, I think as you start getting bigger and start scaling, attracting the right leaders and getting kind of the right people in the boat matters more and more. So it's critical at the beginning. It gets even more and more critical as you start letting go of certain areas, because your job as co-founder, as CEO, is really to get the thing going, start to, you're wearing 1,000 hats, you're working like crazy, and we'll talk about a little bit of the work-life balance part as well, but you're getting to the proof points that show you that what you're doing has a chance to succeed. And at some point, if it's succeeding, you're going to start to see some traction, something that is actually moving the needle. And that's the point in which you should be able to say, okay, this is going, but I'm not the best person anymore to be doing sales. I need to bring some serious professional sales knowledge into the organization. Okay, you do that. Then the same happens with marketing. The same happens with every product, like every area of the company. You need to start bringing on a little bit of depth of expertise. And I think that's one of the awesome things about the US and Boston as an entrepreneurial ecosystem, where we could attract incredible people that had a lot of very relevant experience to help us build what we built. And then maybe the last thing is, trying to pull in as many resources as you can. There's so many things that are, I don't want to say free, because not all of them are free, but available, right? If you think even Techstars, right, as a network, as a kind of accelerator space, being surrounded by peers that help push each other's companies in a very positive, way, I think was game changing. And we definitely took advantage of everything that was around us. Interns from MIT and free projects from schools, and all these accelerator resources that were thrown at us, associates, and all of these things, right? They mattered, and they helped us get to where we were going. And then the last one is, I think, at least coming from a different world, a different country, different culture, this concept of networking and giving back, and I know Techstars talks a lot about that. It's very true, right? There's a lot of people that just want to help. They want to connect you with somebody else. They want to give you, advice. There's a lot of that. Making sense of it is not easy, but if you can use that effectively, it can be kind of a pretty strong resource at your disposal. So those are some of the things that I think, at least for me, were incredibly important to get us to where we ended up, that success story. Now, as we think about some of the maybe lessons learned and things that I would do differently, and maybe this is, if the good things are valuable, I think this is where it gets really interesting. As I coach a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, and many of the times we spend most of our time on these subjects, right? The first one is probably getting to product market fit, recognizing it before scaling. I feel like our investors, the environment, and our competitors, like everything was pushing us to go faster, move the needle, choose your KPI, and it's always revenue, it's always customers. But if you're trying to do that before you have product market fit, it could be challenging, it could be a risk to your business. Because once you start going down that path, it's almost impossible to take it back. You cannot unravel it, right? So I think that get to product market fit before you start pressing the gas on your go-to-market. That's the first thing that I think was probably a good lesson learned. The second one, we always thought about product market fit, and I just said, right, get to product market fit. And this time around, we can talk about that too, but we're thinking about go-to-market fit as much as we're thinking about product market fit. You need to have an awesome product. It's going to be better, faster. Like whatever it is that makes your product special and differentiated for that problem, critical. You can get away without it, but it's not enough. It used to be enough. Now you need that plus go-to-market fit, which means what's your insight into a market? How are you going to get to that market? How is it going to be supported by your unit economics? And all of these things, we figured out as we were going, but we didn't think about them beforehand. And so we kind of started narrowing down and experimenting to get to where we landed, but that's maybe not the best course to end up there. And then tied to that, I think as you think about go-to-market fit, pricing, I think we were very slow to start experimenting with pricing. We said $99 a month, and that's what we said because we looked at the marketplace and we spoke to 100 small businesses, and they said, yeah, we'd pay $100, and that's what it was for years, 2-3 years. We didn't change pricing, and I think if we had been smarter, we had started experimenting a little earlier, we probably would have found a couple of things. One, we were creating much more value for certain segments than others. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we were creating much more value than we were capturing in many cases. So pre-selling a year contract so that you can actually get money into your company to fund some of your growth instead of always relying on external capital. Raising prices for those people where you were actually creating a ton of value, where those leads we were helping them generate and that growth we were showing the small business could actually translate to more value capture for us. I think those are some areas that I would definitely focus on more. And then maybe the last one, and I'm happy to pause. I mean, I can probably keep on talking otherwise, but the last one is I mentioned we were naive and ambitious. Very large problem. SMB, everybody wants to go after SMB because there's 30 plus million of them in the US alone. They all have similar problems, but when you start really getting smart about it, somebody says SMB, it means something different than what somebody else says SMB. And one of the challenges is the market is complex. Our product was complex because we were trying to educate a market that didn't know they needed marketing help. So now you've got a complex market with a complex product, and the actual user was an unsophisticated user. Obviously smart, passionate small business owners, but they're not technology users. They're not like the early adopters. So now you're trying to solve complex problems across different axes. And I think that's a risk. You should choose one thing that you're going to solve in which you can do it in a very differentiated, strong way, much better than anybody else. And then you can solve the next problem. But you cannot try to do it across 3, 4, 5 different things because you're just going to get diluted. And I think we fell a little bit into that trap ourselves at some point.
Max, I think one of the things that you said that I thought was something I hadn't heard a lot before, and maybe, I've probably been describing it, just not using it in such a succinct name, was go-to-market fit, right? And I feel like that's such a, an interesting thing within, startup theory, right? Like if, a lot of people can pitch that, oh, I want to create an electronic vehicle, or, oh, I want to service, power plants, or I want to build space software, right? Or whatever, right? But go to market, fit really comes to the point of, can you actually reach these markets, right? And actually properly have customer discovery with them, actually be able to reach them within a sales cycle, given your limited reach as an early stage, team. So really one of the things that I think, comes from your experience in ThriveHive is that a lot of people will work with SMBs, especially like restaurants or corner stores, because it's easier and more accessible, right? The go-to-market strategy is just going to, right, one of these stores and literally talking with the manager or the owner there, right? So I'm really wondering, as your company ThriveHive built a business model around servicing SMBs, I think a lot of other companies try to do the same, but fall into kind of pits of problems where, the margins aren't high enough, a lot of these SMBs, they usually don't have a lot of spare extra cash, right? And so being able to build a business model that's both venture scalable and profitable in some cases, right, is really challenging. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and it's a great point, and I think we typically go after problems we can relate with. If you relate to the corner shop or this restaurant because you're seeing it, right? You're living in it because you're a patron or what have you. Then people start identifying problems, and like you said, it's accessible, so you can just walk in and waltz and meet the owner, meet the person in charge, and it's fairly easy to get in. The thing that people miss is that that's great for when you're doing your market research. It's great when you're finding product market fit, but it's very hard to scale. And I will caveat this when we talk about go to market. I hate to speak about absolutes, but in general, what you're describing is what would be called like a field sales operation, where you have somebody literally walking into the customer and meeting them in person. That's typically not something that you can support with the type of budgets that a small business owner has. So now you have a challenge, and I think that's why so many people try SMB and fail or move up market. The challenge is that you started by doing this field sales approach, talking to them in person because they're readily available and accessible down the corner. But then you realize like, oh, wait a second, the unit economics are upside down. My cost to acquire each customer, if I have to pay somebody, not the founder, but somebody to actually go and meet with them in person and then, pay them the commission if the business closes, is going to be out of whack with whatever I expect to get out of that lifetime value. And so, it's not impossible. And what I said, you shouldn't ever talk in absolutes. You think of companies, I think Toast is probably like one of the best examples where you actually have a field sales, operation, and they're going into these small businesses and selling them on the point of sale product, and they make it work. So there's ways to make it work, but you need to know why is the go-to-market that I chose going to work for my market. And some of the things that you said are very important, right? The product complexity, the buyer complexity. Am I selling to a single person? Is there like a decision-making group? How does that look like? And also sales cycles. So timing is also important, right? Another one that I think, many people miss, and they want to go after the SMB market and say, oh, I'm just going to do PLG. PLG is the rage, right? Everybody wants to do product-led growth, PLG. And the problem is, if you don't have any virality built into your product, if your problem is not really horizontally uniform across many, many, many different potential customers, it's very hard to make that case that a free product will have the conversion rate that you need to then support. Again, it all goes back to unit economics, right? So all of these things, in my mind, end up becoming a little bit of a question of how do you turn your go-to-market into a machine, a system, right? And generating leads and qualifying those leads, turning them into customers, and then expanding that customer into, hopefully a larger deal size over time. And if you think about like who's doing what in each one of those sections, then you can understand, is PLG the right approach, or is maybe the PLG thing the way I generate leads, but not the way I close the customer? And then you take it through like those steps that I mentioned. Now, to answer your questions, how do I think about it? I think it depends, right? It depends. Am I saying SMB, restaurants only, very vertical specific? In our case with ThriveHive, we had the advantage that we were very early on into the inbound marketing movement. So we started creating content almost from day one. So that's something that, we built up this very large, content data set or just a library that eventually would become our go-to-market. In the meantime, we were experimenting with paid. And again, timing is everything. We were like spending money on Facebook advertising before people were doing a lot of Facebook advertising. We were spending money on retargeting before people were spending money. We were like trying to always stay up ahead of like whatever was next, right? Instagram, I mean, you name it. Whatever people are doing now, we're doing like, a year or 2 years before they were doing it. And then it ran out because competition catches up, the cost per lead goes up, and then all of a sudden you can't keep doing that. But you always have to be experimenting and trying the next thing. So when I'm talking about turning your go-to-market into a machine, there's like two things that are happening. One, you probably need to find something that works. In our case, it was this organic search, so a lot of SEO work with content plus paid to get those people into the website, convert them on some piece of content that then would be qualified and fed into our sales team. But then the other piece, we had a small percentage of our resources that were always allocated towards experimenting and trying new things. You never know what's the next thing, but if you're not trying, then you're never going to be ahead of the rest of the people, right? And so we did a lot of that early on to make it work. And even then, the numbers were very, very tight. We were barely at like, I don't know, initially like the CAC to LTV ratio was off. We managed to get it to 3 and eventually I think to 4 and even north of 4, but it was still very tight. And then the payback period was also tight. So it was a very well-oiled machine where if for whatever reason, like one of the things was not, finely tuned that week, that month, that year, we could be completely out of whack on our unit economics. So we had to invest a lot in making that a very repeatable, scalable type of go-to-market experience for our go-to-market team.
I had a follow-up question on that. Actually, a few of them, but let me get through them one by one. One of the things that you had mentioned is, looking at, a lot of people will try to, invest in not invest, but maybe build a company in servicing SMBs, right? But they end up eventually just going up market, right? Do you feel like perhaps people should maybe look at like a top-down approach where they originally go up market and then when they're scaling, they scale into selling with SMBs? Or do you think that, maybe there's a different strategy out there?
Yeah, I think that again, there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's very hard for an early stage startup to go and sell to a Fortune 500 company, right? You just don't have the credibility, you don't have the market understanding, you don't have the history and a lot of the requirements uh, on day zero. And that's why most people start, from the lower end and then walk their way up into the high end. But I think what the point I was trying to make is it should be a deliberate, thoughtful approach where you know you're going to do it, not that you're surprised and reactively doing it. And I think that's the key on like thinking about your go-to-market, thinking about okay, I know that I want to end up here. How do I get there? Versus, oh, this is not working. I got to, do this, do that. And we love, throwing around the word pivot. I'm okay with pivots. There's nothing wrong with them. But if you can preempt them, then why wouldn't you, right? So there's ways that you can think about like how the market is going to be ready or not to support your go-to-market costs. So all we're talking about here is like, what does it cost to acquire a customer? How much can I get out of the lifetime of that customer? If you're going after the true SMB long tail and somebody who's making $40,000, $50,000 a year on a very small local business, you are not going to get a lifetime value of millions, right? It's just the math is not there. So you're going to know that ahead of time. And if your expectation is to serve the mid-market, by starting there, that's all good and fine. I think the opposite is probably harder. If you're trying to start in the middle and then go lower, maybe you do it more as a defensive strategy where you put a low price product at the low end so that you don't get disrupted from the bottom. But most disruptive technologies come from the bottom up.
Okay, got it. Got it. And another thing that you had brought up was around, you innovating around Facebook marketing. Now, obviously, Facebook marketing has taken a little bit of a hit recently, with the privacy changes. But I feel like it's resurged a little bit back up. But what would be your recommendations right now with kind of marketing strategies now, given these privacy changes that were made on iOS?
Yeah, I think it's not just us as of right now, but just, the last couple of years, the cost to acquire a customer has been steadily going up and up and up and up. And that's just because, the inventory is getting depleted. So you're bidding against venture capital dollars. If you're starting a company serving the SMB in fill in the blank, there's a Silicon Valley startup that just raised 50 million that is doing the same thing and very willing to spend a lot of money on those same ads and those same clicks or eyeballs. So my first advice is don't try to outcompete them. You won't. You have to find a way around it. Do I have the answer? No. I mean, that's exactly what growth marketers are doing all day, running experiments, trying to figure out what can work, what cannot work. I would say that from the data, the product-led growth thing is so attractive because if you find a product that can be built and adopted by a community or a certain market in a way that doesn't require you to push too many resources into its distribution, back to this virality, large top of funnel, very uniform problem across that top of funnel, then that's why people do it, right? And now it doesn't have to be that the product that you put out there to be free is necessarily going to be exactly the product you're going to sell. You just need to be connected in a way that makes sense so that in that life cycle of your lead to customer, you can actually trigger that conversion. So if anything, I would say experimenting or brainstorming around ways to provide a lot of value, either for free or in a way that it's innately shareable, it's probably much more valuable than trying to optimize, this copy or that copy on my call to action. Like that's just, that game is over. You won't win that game unless you have a lot of money in the bank.
All right. Speaking about being able to get a lot of money, right? Right now, because of macroeconomic conditions, we're currently experiencing a downturn. And I wanted to ask you if you had any experience, thinking about fundraising through a downturn. You've definitely worked through a few downturns, you've told me in the past. What would you recommend for founders currently going through a downturn? What does the macroeconomics, what type of, what do macroeconomic pressures affect the startups? And, what are the, differences in fundraising during a downturn?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is you have to know what game you're playing. If I said, this time around we built our company in a very different way. Telescope has the advantage of, I don't know, we have probably like 20 years of runway because we're basically profitable and we own our own destiny, right? That's very nice to have, but very hard to do if that's not the path that you're in. Now, the question becomes, if I'm on a traditional, 6-stage venture path, what does my runway look like? What does the next milestone in terms of getting to that next round look like? Has the market shifted? I've been through both downturns as well as tightening of the milestones, where it used to be that you needed to get to, I don't know, $1 million in revenue run rate, and then all of a sudden $1 million in ARR became 100K of MRR. Well, guess what? That's 20% more because there's 12 months in a year. So if you were trying to get to your million and you went to the VC and it's like, oh yeah, you know what? This $83,000 here is not enough. You actually need to get to 100. Well, shit, I don't have 2 months of runway, right? So you got to understand your game, and that understanding comes from getting out there, listening to what's happening, keeping your eyes open. And I think there's a very fine balance you need to strike. How much do I look out versus how much do I focus in? And I think you need to focus out enough early on to get conviction as to what the future will look like. And once you have that conviction, stop paying attention and go do what you think is the answer. And then go 100% full force into what you think is the answer. Meaning, in this case, there's a clear tightening, there's talks of recession, and a lot of the venture money is maybe getting a little harder to access. A few things. First of all, harder to access doesn't mean there's no funding rounds, right? People think like, oh, the world's going to end, and you hear like this podcast or that article, and then I'm never going to raise money. No, good companies will always raise money. Smart founders are always going to get backed. If you have an unfair advantage, a unique product, clear go-to-market, like those things, like that's what people are looking for, and money is there getting ready to be put to work. Now, what has changed? I think it's more competitive. So instead of a 1-month process, you probably have to plan for a 3-month, real diligence, real competitive. You're competing for those dollars, so you need to continue to show that progress through the process. Whereas before, you might be able to, you could wing it a little bit. If you like press on the gas, show that spike, get excitement, get the cash in the bank, and then go figure it out. That won't happen anymore. I think you're gonna have to be more thoughtful, be more realistic about the market, and act accordingly. And I think the most important thing in my mind is being willing to change fast. So the moment that you're looking out and let's say that you've completely made up your mind, the world's going to end, the economy is going to tank, venture money is going to be unattainable. Okay, what do I need to do internally? And then make sure that you're changing your trajectory really, really fast. Why is that important? Why is the speed at that point so important? Because it's an asymmetric bet. I actually heard this in one of the podcasts I hear, and it makes so much sense, right? If I overcorrect, and let's say that my decision is I need to extend my runway to 24 months, which is what everybody's talking about. If that's my decision and I can correct that this week, assume that I was wrong and the market didn't correct as much as I thought it was going to correct, and the world is okay. Well, guess what? I can always rebuild from having overcorrected. But if I don't overcorrect and it takes me 6 months to react and 6 months to execute, then I might have 6 months of runway. And if the world is going to end and the recession is here, I'm dead. Like the company's done. And there's no coming back from that. So it's basically an asymmetric bet, right? I better overcorrect because the outcome of overcorrecting is not as painful as the outcome of not overcorrecting. So that's my advice. I don't think you have to be crazy, but you have to be thoughtful. If you are planning to raise money, know it's going to be harder, it's going to take longer, and take action. That's all you can do.
Do you think that for like the absolute earliest, like pre-seed or even before that, right, idea on a napkin, do you think that creates like a lot of pressures for people who might be considering starting like a brand new company?
I think it does, but I think it's all in the entrepreneur's mind. I was talking about how naive I was early on. I think this is the best time to start a company. The reason why is money's there, the investments are there, good ideas get funded. And if you have money in the bank, guess what? There's going to be amazing talent because people are doing, the hiring freezes and the layoffs, and you see it across the board, right? So there will be amazing talent looking to join early stage companies. And most of the big, like world-changing companies were founded in the toughest of times because that's when you have to get creative. That's when the one thing is, look, a lot of people are going to fail because they don't correct quickly enough. They don't have enough money in the bank. The market shifted and they didn't realize it. And that's going to happen. But then the ones that survive, they're going to be stronger companies by nature, right? When you're scrappy, when you make more with less, when you have to be creative with how you build a company to make use of fewer resources, then by definition, those companies are going to be stronger and just going to go further.
Awesome. And a really awesome company that's taking advantage of this downturn probably and really helping companies hire is your current one, right? Telescope. So I'd love to, maybe give you an opportunity to remind the audience and to talk a little bit about Telescope and really learn more about
Definitely.
remote hiring.
Absolutely, yeah. So, well, first of all, I'll talk about our mission. I mentioned we're a very mission-driven company. We are on a mission which is the pursuit of autonomy, purpose, and opportunity for the talented people of the world. It's a big, ambitious, crazy goal. And you might notice I didn't mention software or remote or any of those things because we really believe that there's incredible people everywhere around the world, and sometimes those opportunities aren't really available to them, which means that they cut their career short or they go to places where maybe they're doing things that aren't aligned with what they want to be doing, with the things that they're excited about. And some of the best people might not be helping us make the world better and tackle the toughest challenges. So with that, this idea came from us. We had left the company that acquired us, went to Costa Rica, where I'm from, met with a bunch of people, and we were surprised at how much excitement there was to join early stage startups. It didn't kind of click at the moment, but we came back. I had my Techstars CEO group, and I think 3 or 4 of the people there raised their hands with their ask, I need help recruiting technical talent. I'm like, wait a second. I just met like 15 amazing engineers who are like, they would kill to have like a shot at a role at your company. Why is this market not a more liquid market? And so with that inspiration, that's how Telescope started right before the pandemic. Our first placement happened, I think, a month before lockdown. So that was an interesting time for us. But what we do is we certify this amazing network of engineers in Latin America, specifically starting with Costa Rica, which is by referral only. So that's one of the things that differentiate us. We're differentiated because people bring others into the network because they've worked with them, they went to school with them, they maybe were a manager, a peer, or somebody that you know really well, and you would bring into your team if you were building a team. And once we get that referral, you also get a lot of signal around who's who on different technologies, who's the rock star front end guru that I always go to with the problem that I cannot solve, right? We certify those people through a process which can be as light as a few calls or as involved as a full interview, coding challenge, the whole thing. But the most important thing is we're building a full profile of where they want to be, what is their career going to look like if they're successful in making that transition into a direct to a US tech company opportunity. And sometimes it's, I want to be a CTO one day, or maybe others want to be, I really want to, just lead teams. My calling is to be an engineering manager, a director, a VP of engineering. There's different people with different passions. Sometimes it's more about industry. I want to be in climate change. Like, I'm passionate. I think we should be doing more. I want to be involved. And so once we understand who they are and where they want to go, we match them with opportunities in US companies, mostly startups. Now, the cool thing is once that engineer goes through the interview process with that company, we enable the hiring to make sure that they're compliant and that they're paying all of the taxes, healthcare benefits. We take care of all of the stuff that nobody wants to think about and make it transparent so that they can get to work and start growing together. And we've been doing that for a couple of years. Really excited about where we are as a company. I mentioned we're profitable, we're growing, and hoping to open new countries soon as well.
What are some of the companies that you're thinking about going to next? I know that you have a personal connection and stake in Costa Rica. What are some other countries that you're maybe thinking about?
Yeah, we're going to be very focused in the same LATAM region. I think eventually we might actually go after a global opportunity, but I think the closest in terms of time zone, culture, and just the depth of engineering talent is probably going to be Colombia. After that, probably go to South America and then work our way back up through Central America and Mexico. But yeah, Colombia is probably the next frontier for us.
I think in my opinion, right, just looking at LATAM and the awesome startup community that I'm seeing is starting to grow around that area. I think for a lot of people, and especially like hiring managers or recruiters, it's probably comes from a place of ignorance, right? Just don't know that much about a particular area, right? So in terms of the education for engineers and what's around, right? If you look at a place like in Boston, right, there's a robust university location. If you find an engineer from Boston, you know that they're probably, going to one of the big schools there, right? And so I'd love to hear, maybe around Costa Rica, what are the considerations, of education and, life experiences that arm, potential candidates in Costa Rica that make them really effective candidates, right? Just as well as maybe anywhere else in the world, and maybe what are some unique experiences that they have that might put them above other potential candidates.
Yeah, that's a great question, and a great point. I think that the first thing is, I mean, the country, obviously, regionally speaking, has been really stable, democracy for, I don't know, 70 plus years. On top of that, we've got a very strong education system. So when a very visionary president abolished the army, he made education free and compulsory. So everybody is highly educated. A lot of people get access to technical schools within their neighborhoods. And we've got this kind of feeder for technical schools into a public university system, which is really robust. So we've been pumping out high quality engineers as a country for many, many years. We also have a long-standing history of foreign direct investment. So in the 90s, another president kind of went out and brought Intel was our first kind of big brand name who established a large presence in Costa Rica. And after that, Amazon, Akamai, IBM, VMware. I mean, I can keep going on and on and on. There's basically this incredible influx of US-based companies that have established their presence there, where a lot of engineers cut their teeth and learn and grow. The other thing which probably plays into this is a long-standing tradition of outsourcing. So regionally, nearshore outsourcing has been a way in which this has been done in the past. Now, what has changed? I think it was going to happen one way or another, right? But through COVID, it was just accelerated. If you think of like what you were saying, I'm looking for somebody in Latin America. How do I know they went to the right school? How do I know, the job that they did, is it relevant or not? That's one of the reasons why we exist. But beyond that, I think that these engineers who were working through an outsourcing firm, they were doing great work. They were trained and working with US-based teams. They learned about the work ethic, but they felt a little bit like in a prison, right? Where I could see the ceiling and it's so low. I want to just crush through it and become part of the team that I'm working with, because they want me to be part of their team. They want me to be a first-class citizen. That's something we talk about often, first-class citizens. If you're a recruiter in a tech company, you don't want to outsource your core technology because that's who you are. That's what your product is. That's the most important, more valuable thing that you've got, right? So you want that team member to be a first-class citizen, a full team member who's just equal to anybody else. And that's what Telescope enables. It's kind of taking the outsourcing model, flipping on its head, and like the evolution of that model is remote work. So I think that's what really makes Costa Rica such a great place. You've got the education, the talent, the cultural affinity, and the stability, and it's kind of like the perfect storm with remote work becoming the norm, right?
I think for a lot of companies, they start to get very diverse when they outsource, right? And then that starts to get scaled back and stripped away as the company starts hiring, right? I'd love to get your thoughts in terms of like how companies can actually leverage diversity, not just as like a thing where someone talks about it as if it's a stat. And, there's a lot of work being done towards DEI, but I'd love to see about like from a tactical perspective, how diversity actually helps companies.
Yeah, well, I think that it's very clear to me that the first thing, when you have geographic diversity, you're going to have cultural diversity. And something which I didn't mention, in the last point you were making, but it's also important. Different people from different countries come from very different personal histories, and also the system around you is different, right? So we've seen, for example, in Latin America, a lot of entrepreneurs and very small businesses, small business-minded type entrepreneurship, but people that are very driven to go and take ownership of something and kind of solve it, right? And I think for startups, that's a key asset, right? That maybe not everybody has. If you go to other geographies, that might be different. As we think of D&I, the other part is, of course, just tapping into a completely diverse pool by opening up your recruiting to a global, remote, fully distributed team. And one of the important things is, yes, it's great to have the stat, but you also have to make sure that, and I mentioned this first-class citizenship. What does that mean? If everybody's going to be in a room, around a whiteboard, and there's one person who's in Costa Rica and he or she is a diverse engineer working in your company, but they don't get the same experience, for me, that doesn't count, right? You just failed at it. Like everybody needs to have access to the same resources, same career growth, same access to mentorship, and whatever everybody else has, you should give to your remote engineers. And then by doing that, of course, you just broaden the pool of people that you can tap. It's not just Boston, it's not just the US, it's not just, it's basically the world. And so, of course, we have a lot of systemic problems with gender diversity, for example, in engineering. But if you broaden the pool 1,000x, guess what? 1,000x of a small number is a much larger number. So you can actually be focused on making sure that your pipeline actually includes all of these diverse groups. And by doing that, just by the very nature of making sure that you're interviewing those people, getting them into your process, there's a much more, a higher likelihood that your team will be diverse. And I think we've seen that, right? And many of our clients actually request us to help them with that diversity angle. And by working with us, that's the first step, because obviously everybody's going to be Latin, coming from Latin America. But then beyond that, we can also help just broaden the pool at the top of the pipeline for them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's really important sentiment, right? Like to make sure that everyone, even if they're, an outsourced employee or, someone who is trying to, you hired them, they're part of the team, they might be remote somewhere, they're not from the US, they're not like everyone else, but, diversity in the team means that everyone needs to be treated the same, right? Given the same opportunities. And, it's not just a stat, it's that they're actually integrated as part of the team and that they're pushing towards the goal, right? Pushing towards your mission, right? And especially if you're a mission-driven company, right? I think if a mission's super resonant, it transcends cultural boundaries, it transcends borders, right? It can be a global thing. And so, I think that's something that's really important. I think a lot of companies can get a lot of benefit in that. As we're coming to the end here, for anybody who might want to, tender your services or reach out to you for any of the various things that we've talked about today, how can someone best talk to you?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the plug. Obviously, our website has the contact us form. You can reach out to me via LinkedIn, or my email is very easy. It's max@telescopeds.com. So just send me a note. We're still a very small operation, so you'll get the royal treatment. And we love helping early stage founders. We love building teams. And I think the most important thing is, by doing this, you're actually going to change somebody's career trajectory. You're going to change their lives by giving them access to the interesting challenges that you're working on and opening up the doors to at least consider them for an interesting job that could be a great fit for what they want to be doing.
Well, awesome. I could talk to you forever, Max. I think that's something that's pretty apparent. But, just out of respect for your time, we're going to end the episode here. It has been such an awesome episode talking about how to, work with SMBs, all different types of global engineering. I think that's a really awesome conversation that we've been able to put out there. I really hope that you've enjoyed the episode. Please, feel free to follow on and get ready for some really awesome conversations coming down the line. And please remember, if George can learn, so can you. So have a good one, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.